Rabbi.
Tom, what's doing?
Baruch Hashem. I'm looking for my other Gemara. I have I have the Steinsaltz, so I'm good.
What time is it? 22 up to?
The Mishnah on 23, I think.
23.
I think Ahmed Base.
Oh, yeah. He said about it this morning.
Amen. How you doing, Rabbi?
All right, Baruch Hashem. Things are good. I think Vlad's with us here as well. Vlad, you there?
Hey, Rav. Yes.
Good.
Just
Baruch
listening.
Hashem. Learning Torah in the afternoon. It's great.
Yeah.
Baruch Hashem. So we just wait for it. Yeah, I hear you.
It's what I spend all day, Rabbi, looking for my glasses, looking for my keys, looking for this is what
What are you
I
losing?
found.
Huh.
I found it.
Baruch Hashem.
Hello, Rabbi. And Colin.
Assalamu
And
alaikum.
Vlad. What's
How are
going
you?
on? Let me share my
Looking forward.
Hey, Kevin.
Hey, what's going on? I blurred out the back of my house so you can't see all my fancy stuff.
Oh, you look good, Rabbi Kevin.
How you doing? I'm actually going to do a screen share. It'll be easier, I think, because we have some, I drew some pictures last night and I just uploaded it. So here, hold on. Let me see if this works. Tell me if you guys can see my screen.
I like your shirt.
I wear it all the time. Can you guys see my screen?
Never seen it.
Yeah, I see it.
Okay. Is my video face hovering over anywhere on the screen?
Nope.
No, it's perfect. I see your face on the top, but I like your face. So
Okay, good. I don't want to block. Whatever. You can move me around if you need to get me out of the way. You should be able to see the Gemara now, right?
Yep.
yeah, beautiful. I love it.
Okay. Okay. Can you see the picture over here?
Yep.
And my mouse you can follow?
Yep.
Okay.
Wow.
All right. I drew this myself. This is not very fancy, but it'll work for what for our needs.
Wow.
Beautiful. Beautiful.
Not the same thing like the whiteboard, but it's good. Okay. So really, let's just pick up right away. Yep. Okay. So we're discussing here in the Mishnah really a completely new idea. Obviously, it's a very fun Gemara. It's Yevamos, really, really classic Yevamos type of stuff in terms of just following who's who. But it's not going to hurt your brain. Meaning, as long as you follow the chart, it's actually very enjoyable. Okay. Let me just pour coffee because that's what I do. Okay. Like this. We're discussing here in the Mishnah, and we'll just keep it nice and simple. Says the Mishnah, Mi shekidesh achas mishtei achayos. Let's say you have Ruvain, and Reuven married two ladies, Rachel and Leah, and Rachel and Leah are sisters. Now, it says here, Ve'ein yodeya eze mehen kiddush, and he's not sure which one he married. So we're going to work with the assumption that he's not even sure which one of the two, right? So maybe he said Hareya mikudeshesli to two sisters. He said Hare, one of you is mikudeshes to me, and he wasn't sure which one he meant. Somehow he didn't know, and he didn't know which one of these ladies is his wife. So each one of them is a suffix whether they're married to him. It's very obvious, says the Mishnah. Noisin get lezeh, v'get lezu, right? Noisin get lezu, v'get lezu. Each one requires a get mi suffix, meaning mi suffix. We have to be concerned that Rachel or Leah might be his wife. That so far is really straightforward, pretty straightforward stuff. Now, obviously, if he doesn't give them a get, you have one of these ladies that's for sure married to him. We just don't know which one, so we'll treat both of them as a suffix. Continues the Mishnah. Meis v'loy ach echad cholitz l'shteyim. So slowly here. This case here is, let's say Reuven dies. So, right, he's supposed to give a get. He didn't give a get. So now he's got one wife, of which we're not sure which one it is. Is it Rachel or is it Leah? Says the Mishnah. This is diagram number 2 over here, right? So Shimon is his brother who survives him, one brother. Well, Shimon has to do yibum with his wife. We just don't know which one his wife is. So therefore, the halacha is he does chalitza with both. Now let's just walk ourselves through what the concern would be if he wanted to do yibum, right? Let's say he wanted to do yibum with Rachel. What's the problem with doing yibum with Rachel? Rachel might be the Yevama, in which case then that's fine, but it might be Leah. And if it's Leah, then what's Rachel? The sister of the Yevama, which is Achos Kukaso, right? That's the sister of my Zika. So he has Zika with Rachel and Leah. If he does Yibum with the first one, now you might say, well, why don't we say let him do Chalitza with Rachel, and now he should be able to do Yibum with Leah? Why? Because Mimanavshach. If Rachel was actually the Yevama, then the Chalitza took care of all of the responsibilities. And who is Leah? Leah is just a random girl. So he should be allowed to even marry her regularly. So the Yibum should be completely mutter. Again, we're not discussing whether he's allowed to have Bia with Leah for separate reasons. Just the simple idea that the act of Bia could be, let's say, a Bias Kiddushin. There's nothing wrong with it. The Teretz says, no, there's a separate Issur D'Rabbanan. We've talked about Zika and creating Achos Kukasoi. There's also an Issur D'Rabbanan of Achos Chalutzaso. If I've given chalitza to a woman, I'm not allowed to be with her sister. Why? It's a derabanan, which is a concern for the sister of my wife who I've divorced. If I'm married and I divorce my wife, well, now I'm not allowed to marry her sister midaraisa. It's an erva, achos ishta. So if I give my wife a get, I can't be with her sister. So since a chalitza is very similar to a get, midarabanan, we said I can't be with the sister of the woman who I gave chalitza to, just like I can't be with the sister of the woman I gave a get to. So since both of those D'Rabbanans exist and Shimon is the only brother, the moment he gave Chalitza to Rachel, immediately Leah became a problem because of Achos Chlutzaso, and Rachel was a problem to begin with to do Yibum with, because then she was Achos Kukaso, because Leah still has a Zika with him. And it would work in either direction. I'm just picking Rachel to start with. So that is the first line here, really, the first important line in the Mishnah, that if Reuven dies, leaves over one brother Shimon, then he does chalitza to both of them. Continues the Mishnah. Hayu loy shnayim. Let's say Reuven died, and instead of it just being Shimon, now he has two brothers. He has Shimon and Levi. Now you could almost imagine already how this helps us a little bit over here, because now the only reason why Shimon in the previous case couldn't do Yibum after he did chalitza was because he was the one who did chalitza to Rachel, so he has a problem with Leah because she's the sister of the woman he gave a chalitza to. But now that there's a second brother, well, we can use that. So look at the picture. What does the picture say? Shimon and Levi are left over by Reuven. Reuven dies, he's got two brothers. Shimon has to do chalitza first, clearly, because if someone does Yibum first, you have the same problem you have up here. You don't know which one is actually the Yevama, and there's a Zika, so this is the sister of your Zika, Achos Kukaso. So therefore, the first one, whoever it is, Shimon or Levi, has to do chalitza. But once Rachel and once Shimon is cholitz with Rachel, let's say, Now Levi could do Yibum. Why? Because if Rachel was the Yevama, then the Chalitza takes care of everything. If Rachel wasn't the Yevama, then Leah's the Yevama. And well, then Yibum with Leah is completely mutter. And therefore the Yibum is mutter. Meaning to say, Levi could basically marry Leah. Either he's marrying her as a Yibum, or the act of Yibum will be like a Kiddushin of Yibum, like it says in the Mishnah Kiddushin, that if a person wants to marry a woman, he can use Kesef, Shtar, or Bia. So the Bia, that is the Yibum Bia, is going to effectively be his marriage to her, because either way, it'll work. Either Leah is the Yavama and the Yibum works to make her his wife, or she's not. And really Rachel was, but since Shimon already did Chalitza with Rachel, who is Leah? She's just a random girl. Of course, Levi's allowed to marry her, and therefore it works. Says the Mishnah, if he had Hayu Lo Shnayim, Echad Choletz ve'echad Miyab. But again, the order matters. First do Chalitza, because again, if he didn't do Chalitza first, Yibum's a problem of Achos Kukaso. So far, so good?
Yes.
Okay. Continues the Mishnah. Kadmu v'kansu, let's say in that exact case we were talking about, where I just spent some time talking about how first we must have a chalitza, because if, let's say, Shimon doesn't do chalitza and Levi does Yibum first, we have a problem of achos skukaso. Says the Mishnah, let's say they both went ahead and did Yibum. Let's say they both did Yibum, right? So let's say Shimon did Yibum with Rachel and Levi did Yibum. Here, we'll look at this case here. We're talking case number 4, yeah? Shimon did Yibum with Rachel and Levi did Yibum with Leah. So they shouldn't have. Like we just said, really first Chalitza, then Yibum. But let's say they said, we don't care. We're going to do what we want. Shimon does Yibum with Rachel and Levi does Yibum with Leah. Now, one of these ladies was the Yevama and one of these ladies was not. Let's work it out. If Rachel was the Yevama, then Shimon is married to Rachel. Well, if that's true, then Leah was never the Yevama. Levi is allowed to marry Leah. If Leah was the Yevama and Shimon did Yibum with Rachel, which he shouldn't have, because that would have been Achos Kukaso. But once he did the Yibum, right? So that means that Levi can do Yibum with Leah because she's the Yevama. So whichever way you go, after the fact. Beforehand, you want to do Chalitza first. If we're asking what's mutter, I have a problem with before doing anything, I can't do Yibum because of Achos Kukaso. But once Shimon does Chalitza, now Levi could do it here. So too be the Evid, if they both did Yibum, no one's going to tell them to get divorced because no one is married to someone they're not allowed to be married to. I mean, this is as a contrast, let's say, to a case where a person is a Kohen and a Grusha falls to him in Yibum and he's not supposed to do the Yibum, but let's say he did. It takes, they're married. But the halacha is he's got to divorce her because he's not allowed to remain with her. Okay, let's continue in the Mishnah. So that was the case of Kadmu v'Kansu. Now that formula that we just sort of, I'm going to zoom out over here. That formula of the first is where Reuven dies leaving over one brother. And then a scenario where he leaves over two brothers. And then what happens if those two brothers go ahead and incorrectly do Yibum? That formula of these three is going to repeat itself again. We're just going to layer in a second person, a second husband. So it looks complicated. It's really not that complicated. It sounds complicated, but it's really not. I promise you, if you pay attention, it will be super simple. Continues the Mishnah. Mishnah says, Shnayim shekidshu shtei achayos. So this is really the same case as the first one, except that Reuven marrying one of two ladies, it's now Reuven and David. Right? Reuven and David are unrelated, two separate men. One thinks he's married Rachel or Leah, and the other one thinks he's married Rachel or Leah. Meaning, one of them is married to Rachel, one of them is married to Leah. We just don't know which one is married to which. A little strange, but that's the case. So what's the halacha? So really, it's the same exact thing as we said before. Each one of them, if they are going to have to give a get to both, because each one of them has a suffix who's their wife. Says the Mishnah. Shnayim shekidshu, Reuven and David, shtei achiyos, Rachel and Leah. Ze eino yedea ezoi kidesh. This one David doesn't know who. Ze eino yedea, and Reuven doesn't know who he married. So therefore, ze noisen shnei gitin, v'ze noisen shnei git. They both have to give a get to both ladies for the same exact reason in the first case. Nothing's been added right now that is really that different. It's just we have two guys. Continues the Mishnah. What happens if now both of them die? So now David and Reuven die, and that's here in this case here, we'll call that number 5, right? So you have David and Reuven. Reuven leaves over Shimon as a brother. David leaves over Yaakov as a brother. So says the Mishnah, if let's say that happened, Shimon has to do chalitza to both, and Yaakov has to do chalitza to both. And again, the reasoning is because really David's effect on Reuven and Reuven's effect on David is irrelevant. In the end of the day, from Reuven's perspective, when he died, he left over one of these ladies as a Yevama to Shimon, and Shimon has a responsibility to do chalitza with both. Yaakov has the same problem when David died. So really, Shimon and Yaakov have to do chalitza to both of these ladies. Nice and straightforward. Yibum cannot be done for a little bit more of a problem, because same reasoning before, it's an achos kukaso situation, same like before. However, here there's an additional problem, meaning we know that, let's say Rachel is Shimon's Yevama, Leah's not, but Leah would then be Yaakov's Yevama, which would mean not only would Shimon be usher to do Yibum with Leah because of achos kukasai, it would be usher because she's a Yevama to Shuk. She's a Yevama to Yaakov. So there's two problems there. So that doesn't complicate our mission. I'm just pointing out that it's a more severe situation, including two people. But just in terms of their independent requirements, they both have a chiyuv to do chalitza. Continues the Mishnah. What happens if lezeh echad ulezeh shnayim? So we just said where Shimon and Yaakov were only one brother each. What happens if Reuven dies, leaving over just Shimon, but David dies and leaves over two brothers, Yaakov and Yitzchak, says the Mishnah. Right, so lezeh echad ulezeh shnayim, hayachid choletz l'shteihem. Shimon does chalitza to both, again, because he's no different than he's been until now. He's got to take care of both ladies, because out of the suffix, which one's actually the Yevama? The Hashnayim, whereas Yaakov and Yitzchak, they have a din of two brothers, like we saw earlier, that they therefore have a din of echad choletz v'echad miyam. Let's just take a look here, right? We saw, sorry, let's do that again. This is the case right here that we're looking at. Sorry, no,
next case.
This case right here. You have Rachel and Leah. Reuven made Kedushin, he's not sure which one. So Shimon has to do chalitza with Rachel and with Leah for the same exact reason as he had to do chalitza with both of them when he was just on his own, because he doesn't know which one is Reuven's real wife, and therefore, because of achas chulutzaso and other reasons, he can't do yibum to any of them, must do chalitza to both. And Yaakov and Yitzchak are not sure which one, Rachel or Leah, was David's wife. So therefore, the rule for them is the same as the rule is here. When Rachel and Leah were from Reuven, and Shimon and Levi, as long as Shimon did chalitza first, Levi was allowed to do yibum. So that's going to be the same halacha here. From their perspective, they're not sure if Rachel or Leah was David's wife. So as long as Yaakov does chalitza first, let's say to Leah, Yitzchak can go ahead and do yibum to Rachel, because let's work it out. If Leah is the Yevama, then Yaakov took care of that with this chalitza. And if Rachel's the Yevama, then this yibum is good. So there's nothing wrong with Yitzchak doing yibum. And since from Reuven's perspective, no one did any yibum, and there's no zika here anymore because he gave chalitza to both of these ladies, this woman right here would be completely mutter at this point for Yitzchak to go and be with, because there's no problem of achos kukaso, because Yaakov took care of this chalitza. There's no problem of achos chulutzaso, because he wasn't the one who did the chalitza, and there's no problem of Yevama l'shuk, because Shimon already gave chalitza to both of them. So this woman doesn't have any problems. Yitzchak can go ahead and do yibum. I know it looks complicated, but it's really not that difficult. Okay, continues the Mishnah. Kadmu v'kansu, same, one second. Lost the spot. Lezeh echad u'lezeh shnayim. Okay, kadmu v'kansu, ein moitziin miyadam. Same exact discussion. If Yaakov and Yitzchak both did yibum, they shouldn't have. Yaakov should do chalitza first, and Yitzchak should do yibum only after. But let's say they said, you know what, screw it. We're not interested in following halacha. They both decided, I'm going to marry Leah, I'm going to marry Rachel. Let's say they did that. The halacha is going to be the exact same halacha as what we have over here. They shouldn't have. They should have done this, but they went ahead and did this. And we explained that if they both do yibum, right now, what's the issue? Either Rachel's the Yevama, in which case then this yibum stopped the zika, and in which case Leah is now mutter, or Leah's the Yevama, and this yibum is mutter. And this was never a problem. So say to over here in this case, since Yaakov and Yitzchak, really Yaakov should do chalitza first, but if it's kadmu v'kansu that he did yibum to Leah, and Yitzchak did to Rachel, they don't have to divorce them, because what's the reason why they'd be usher? They're not a Yevama l'shuk, they're not an achos kukaso, and they're not an achos chulutzaso. So there's no reason to say that they're usher. So even though lechatchila they shouldn't do it, B'di Eved, we don't. We'll see in the Gemara exactly what the Chiddush in all these cases are, because we really effectively are just repeating the same klal over and over. So we have to explain in the Gemara what the Chiddush is. We'll get to it. Continues the Mishnah. L'zesh shnayim or l'zesh shnayim. Okay, so this is the final case where we're including all the different people. Reuven dies, leaves over two brothers, Shimon and Levi. David dies and leaves over two brothers, Yaakov and Yitzchak. And in both scenarios, David and Reuven had married either Rachel or Leah. We're not sure which one. One's married to one, one's married to the other. What do we do? Says the Mishnah. L'zesh shnayim or l'zesh shnayim. Echav shel zeh cholitz le'achas ve'echav shel zeh cholitz le'achas. So let's go to this diagram here. Shimon and Levi are the brothers that survive Reuven. Yaakov and Yitzchak survive David. Shimon does chalitza with Rachel. Yaakov does chalitza with Leah. And now, right, what do we do? What would be the halacha? Says the Mishnah, hold on one second. I'm sorry, I jumped the gun. My bad. It's not this case here, it's this case here. Shimon does chalitza with Rachel, and Yaakov does chalitza with Leah. Now, Levi could do yibum with Leah, and Yitzchak could do yibum with Rachel. Just try to imagine you're only looking at each side of this on its own. This is really no different, Yaakov and Yitzchak, as the case above over here. It's just, we're just layering one over on the right side and one on the left side. Really, they don't affect each other, because as long as Shimon did chalitza with Rachel, Levi has no problem with Leah. What are you going to say? Maybe she's a Yevamos l'shuk from here. Well, as long as Yaakov did chalitza with her, that covers it. So what would be the problem for Levi to do yibum with Leah? It's not achos kukaso because Shimon did chalitza. It's not achos chlutzaso because he didn't do the chalitza, and it's not a Yevamos l'shuk because Yaakov did chalitza. So there's no isser. Let Levi do yibum with Leah, and for that matter, Yitzchak has the same exact heter to do yibum with Rachel. Good?
Good.
Okay. Continues the Mishnah Vayta. What about kadmu shnayim b'cholzu? So this is a new wrinkle. Kadmu shnayim b'cholzu. Let's say Shimon did chalitza, and instead of Levi doing yibum, he says, you know what? I don't want to marry Leah. I don't like any of these ladies, and I want out. They could do that, of course. It's his option to do that. Let's say Shimon and Levi did chalitza. So now, one second. Well, here, let me stop for a moment before we go to this case. Let's just look back at this case for a minute. Shimon did chalitza and Yaakov did chalitza. We said that Levi's now allowed to do yibum and Yitzchak's allowed to do yibum. What if Levi didn't do anything with Leah, right? And Yaakov and Yitzchak decided to do yibum. Yitzchak with Rachel and Yaakov with Leah. What would be the problem? The problem would be, Rachel would be a problem of achas kukas because Yaakov didn't take care of Leah. But also, if Levi hasn't done anything, then this woman Leah might be a Yevamos l'shuk. In which case, then Yaakov can't stay with Leah. If these two both did yibum with each of them, they'd have to get divorced because there'd be a standing problem of an isser. We don't know which one is the Yevamos l'shuk, and therefore they'd have to get divorced. It's because of that that the next case is brought in. What if Shimon and Levi, instead of doing chalitza and yibum, both did chalitza? If they both did chalitza, well, now from Reuven's perspective, there's no longer a zika to any of these brothers. So Yevamos l'shuk is taken off the table from these ladies from Yaakov and Yitzchak's perspective because Shimon and Levi have both done chalitza. So now the halacha still is Yaakov's got to do chalitza and Yitzchak's got to do yibum, except one distinction. If let's say Yaakov and Yitzchak blew through the halacha and said, forget it, we both want to do yibum, now they don't have to get divorced. Because why would they? If Yitzchak did yibum with Rachel, right, and she was the Yevama, then base David is taken care of. And if Leah was the Yevama, then he didn't do anything wrong. And Yaakov is good with the yibum, meaning there's no zika anymore, there's no chlutzaso problems, and there's certainly no Yevamos l'shuk problems, so b'di'evad they'd be allowed to stay married. In fact, that is the last line in the Mishnah. Says the Mishnah, Kadmu v'kansu, ein motzia miyad. So I know it sounds complicated, and it looks a little complicated when you look at it in the picture, but really it's this same idea here of start with a chalitza followed by a yibum over and over and over again. It's just being layered on top of multiple scenarios, which begs the question, why is the Mishnah just complicating our lives unnecessarily? It's not really teaching me anything new. It's the same application. It's the application of the same rule in all the different scenarios. You can't marry You can't do Yibum with the sister of your Zika. You can't do Yibum with the sister of your Chalutza. You can't do Yibum with someone who's Yivam L'Shuk. You can come up with a million complicated cases where that's a problem. Like, what is exactly the Chiddush of the Mishnah? The Gemara is going to address it. But before it does, the Gemara is going to address just Balabatish. How do we get into a scenario where you can have a person marrying two ladies and not know who she is? And depending upon that scenario, we have a question. There's two possibilities. Possibility number one is that even when he got married, he had no clue. Rashi sets it up as follows. Ruvain, this case up here, the case of just this regular, how do you even get to this place? Ruvain married two ladies and we don't know who is who. What does that mean? What are we talking, like by Yaakov with Rachel, like literally with Rachel and Leah? Like what are we talking about? How does he not know which one's which? So Rashi sets it up as follows. Ruvain went over to two sisters and said, Hareya mikudeshes li, and he said it to the both of them. Meaning, we're not sure which one he meant. He's not sure which one he meant. He said to one of you, Harei achas mehen mikudeshes li. So let's work under the assumption in Hilchas Kiddushin that works. So the Kiddushin is chal. We don't know which one is which. If that's what the case is, ask the Gemara the following problem. Shma mina Kiddushin she'ein mesurin lebiyah habi Kiddushin. What is Kiddushin ha-mesurin lebiyah or ein mesurin lebiyah? There's a halach in Hilchas Kiddushin that if when I make Kiddushin with a woman, I say Harei mikudeshes li, and now the halacha is I'm not allowed to be with her for whatever reason, the halacha is that the Kiddushin is not chal. It has to be Kiddushin that's mesurin lebiyah. Now again, that doesn't mean that, like for instance, if it's a lav or something like that. What we mean to say over here is, if let's say I'm dealing with a suffix, basically what it is I'm not sure which one of these ladies I'm allowed to be with. I don't know which one of them is my wife. I for sure know who my wife is if I marry, let's say, a grusha as a kind. I know who she is. Here I don't even know if she's my wife. So I'm not allowed to be with that woman. This is called a kedushin that is not mesurin lebiyah, and it's a machlekes Abaye and Rava in Shas, whether kedushin that's mesurin lebiyah or not mesurin lebiyah is chal or not. And from our Mishnah, by requiring a get from both of them, or to both of them, clearly we're concluding that a kedushin that is not mesurin lebiyah is a good kedushin, because why would I need a get? Right? This is one of the Ya'al Kegams, by the way, the famous thing, Abaye Rava, Ya'al Kegam, Yud Ayin Lam and Kuf Gimel Mem. The Kuf is kedushin shemesurin ein mesurin lebiyah if it's chal or not. I think it's Abaye who says it is, and we want to bring a raya from here to. I think it's Abaye says it's not, and we paskin like Abaye that it's not, and here we'd have a raya that it is. So that's a problem. So the Gemara is assuming in its kasha that the reason why these two ladies, it's a doubt who they're married to, or who he's married to, is because he never knew who she was married to. So when he made the kiddushin, it doesn't work. And yet it says in the Mishnah they need to get. Gemara's conclusion is no. No. Reuven made kiddushin to one of these two ladies, and he forgot which one. It's either twins. He forgot if it was Rachel, if it was Leah. Maybe one's name was Rachel, and the other one's name was Rachel and Rachel, and he forgot which one is which. Doesn't make a difference. The point is he's not sure which one of the two ladies he's married to. But when he made the kiddushin, he did know. So we get around the kiddushin problem because it is mesurin lebiyah. At the time he did it, he knew who his wife was. It's just that he forgot afterwards, and now we have a question: which one of these ladies is he allowed to be with? The answer is neither, and therefore they both need to get me suffix. That's the explanation of the Mishnah. Says the Gemara, I'll prove to you that that's the pshat in the Mishnah, because what does it say? Dekanami diktani v'eino yodeya. It doesn't say v'lo katani eino yadua. Eino yodeya is mashma he doesn't know now, but it's mashma that he did know once. Had it said ve'eno yadua, it's not known. Implication there is that it was never known. Shema mina, that we're talking about such a case, and we can't have a raya to the conversation about kedushin mesurin lebiyah. That's not really our sugya, so we'll go a little weiter. Says the Gemara, okay, very nice, wonderful Mishnah. My kamash malan. What is the chiddush of the very first statement in our Mishnah that said you need a get from both of them? If you tell me you have a case where you have a woman and you're not sure if she's married to Reuven, Rachel's married to Reuven, or Leah's married to Reuven, of course you need to get from both of them. What's the shaila? It's a suffix kiddushin. We don't know which one's married. It's a shaila of an ashes is. Of course you're going to need the suffix. I have a piece of meat in front of me. I'm not sure if it's kosher or if it's treif. It's a suffix. Don't eat it. So to over here, you're going to need to get from both women. What's the chiddush over here? Says the Gemara, you're right. On that alone, there's no reason to mention it. It's just setting up the rest of the Mishnah. We're in Masechta Yevamos, not Masechta Gittin. This Mishnah is teaching us the Yevamos shilas. Seifa Itzrachale. We're coming to talk about the rest of the Mishnah. What's the rest of the Mishnah? What's the case? Meis v'loy ach echad, the case where he dies and leaves over one brother, the case here of Shimon with the two chalitzas. Meis v'loy ach echad cholitz l'shteyim. That's the chiddush, meaning this, that in the continuation case. Hayulo shnayim, if there were, let's say, two brothers, Shimon and Levi, echad choletz ve'echad miyabim. Meaning to say, what's the chiddush? Dafka michlitz v'hadar yevumi. You've got to do the chalitza first. Why? Aval yevumi bereisha loy. The kapaga be'achos kukasa. So we explained this as we read the Mishnah. But it's very obvious that Shimon has to do the chalitza with Rachel first, because if Levi jumps the gun and does Yibum first, well, Leah is the sister of Rachel, who might be his kuka. So that's achos kukasa. It's safek achos kukasa. It's a safek derabanan, which again, b'di'eved, safek derab. Again, there's a kasha in the Rishonim here in general. Why don't we address the fact that chlutzaso, achos, kukaso, these are all dinam derabanan. And if we have a suffix, why don't we just say suffix derabanan lakula and do yibum? So they all have different formulations of how they address it. But in the end of the day, when you're dealing with a suffix isser, it's one thing when the suffix isser is a one-time deal. But you're going to be married to this lady, potentially. That means for the rest of your life, every time you have bia with her, it's a suffix. So yeah, technically it's derabanan, but when you have the riboy of the isurim, that's already a reason to say that we're not going to do it. I just wanted to point that out if any of you had a question around that. But either way, so the Gemara is basically pointing out that you're right. I don't need to teach you that you're going to need a get. It's a suffix. The chiddush of the Mishnah really is the dinim of Yevamos of pagabachus kukas. Continues the Gemara. Shnayim shekichu shtei achyos, where now we're talking about where there were two men, so David and Ruvain, and we basically had a repeat of the entire beginning of the Mishnah again, just now with two guys. Ask the Gemara, it goes through the same conversation. Shma mina kedushin shein mesurin lebia habi kedushin, because it assumes we're talking again about where you never knew who she was, meaning David and Reuven are each not sure who they even married to begin with. Gemara says no. Hakanami kishoker lebasayf nisarvu and dekanami diktani ve'ein yoideya v'loiktani ve'ein yadushman. Same dialogue, nothing really new. Says the Gemara, umay kamash milan, meaning again this. Repeating this whole halacha is completely unnecessary, even more so because you already told it to me in the beginning. You're right. This is also coming to teach me the seifa. Seifa itzrachalek. What's the case? What we saw before. Mesu, both men, David and Reuven die. Lezeh echad, lezeh shnayim. Reuven leaves over Shimon. David leaves over Yaakov and Yitzchak. Hayachid Shimon cholitz l'shteim has to do the din of chalitza to both. No different than, by the way, Shimon earlier. V'hashnayim and Yaakov and Yitzchak. Echad cholitz ve'echad miyabim. By the way, same exactly like we said before when it was Shimon and Levi. Ask the Gemara. This isn't the chiddush. This is exactly the same halacha as before. Pshita, hainu reisha. It's exactly the same case. The chiddush is exactly what we taught before. The Gemara says no. Mauditema, I might say, ligzer treo tucha, the very gishmak asmara. Meaning, I have a scenario. Two ladies are married to either David or Reuven. One of the guys dies, and his yavam has to do chalitza to both of them, whereas the other guys gets to do chalitza and yibum. I might think make a gzeira on Yaakov and Yitzchak, right? Yaakov and Yitzchak here should have to do chalitza to both, just like Shimon has to do chalitza to both. Kamash Malon, no, we say that once the chalitza is done by Shimon, Mikra Adin, as long as Yaakov does the chalitza, Yitzchak can do the yibum now. That's the Kamash Malon. Says the Gemara, the dafka michlitz v'hadar yevumi. Obviously, the chiddush here is only if first there's the chalitza of Yaakov and then Yitzchak, because aval yevumi bereisha. Sorry, let me say that again. It has to be that Shimon does his chalitza to both Rachel and Leah first, because otherwise you're going to have a problem of Yevama l'shuk. If he doesn't do any chalitza, then one of Rachel or Leah is Shimon's Yevama. So when Yaakov does chalitza to one, he's taking care of the achos kukaso issue, but he hasn't taken care of the Yevama l'shuk issue. Therefore, they've got Yaakov and Yitzchak can only do this if Shimon has done this first. That's what the Gemara says here. So dafka michlitz v'hadar yevumi aval yevumi bereish loy dekapaga b'yevama l'shuk. Continues the Mishnah. Lezeh shnayim u'lezeh shnayim. It's the last case where we said David and Reuven left over Shimon Levi on Reuven's side and Yaakov and Yitzchak on David's side. It said in the Mishnah that this case, the halacha is each one of them, the first brother does chalitza, and then the second brother could do yibum? Ask the Gemara. Hasu lamali hainu hachla. Again, same question. It's exactly the same din from before. So says the Gemara. Ma'udetema, I would think ligzer dilma miyabim beloy chalitza. Here the chiddush is that I might think dilma miyabim beloy chalitza, meaning to say that maybe the halacha over here is you have two problems, right? Let's think about it. What's the case? If let's say Shimon, let me just make sure I'm reading this right. Ma'udev ligzer dilma miyabim beloy chalitza, that Shimon and Yaakov do chalitza, I might think that you can even do yibum below chalitza. Why? I lost my train of thought here. Dilma miyabim below chalitza. Oh, okay. Yeah, my bad. Very obvious. Okay. So the gzeira here is dilma miyabim below chalitza. Not that you should think you could do that. We're nervous they might go ahead and jump the gun. That's all. Meaning, in the case before where they both do yibum, we don't make them get divorced. Why? Because really after they do the yibum, there's no more zika. But in this case here, let's say Shimon did
Yibum.
And Levi did yibum. The problem is that the halacha is that if we let Levi do yibum, they might do it out of order. If they do it out of order, right, and they do it out of order, then it comes out Levi's not just being with Achos Kukaso, he's also has a problem of the lav of the Yevamos L'Shuk. Achos Kukaso is an Issa D'Rabbanan. Yevamos L'Shuk is an Issa D'Oraisa. So that's already a problem. So we're going to make a gzeira that they both have to first do chalitza and then yibum, and we don't say they both do chalitza. You would have had a havamina that we'd make such a gzeira, Kamash Milan, that we don't. So okay. Now says the Gemara, we have a long Mishnah. The Mishnah is effectively basically saying the same thing over and over again, just teaching us all of the different avoidance of the various different faiths. Ask the Gemara, what are you effectively saying in our Mishnah? You're saying in our Mishnah that if you have a case where two brothers are supposed to do yibum with two sisters, you have a problem of achos kukaso. And so what do we say? We say the halacha is that really, if you have two brothers, achos kukaso, the halacha should be that Yaakov does chalitza with one, and then Yitzchak's allowed to do yibum with the other. And in fact, if Yaakov and Yitzchak jumped the gun and they both did yibum, they could stay together. Ask the Gemara, how is this any different than the Mishnah we've learned a couple of times already, which we'll learn later on in the Masechta on Chavav, a couple of days? What does the Mishnah say? Arba achin, if you have four brothers, Reuven, Shimon, Levi, Yehuda. Reuven and Shimon are married to two ladies, Shnayim mehen nesua, Shtei achiyos, they're married to Rachel and Leah, and Mesu, Reuven and Shimon die. So Levi and Yehuda, now the brothers, have to take care of Rachel and Leah. So Reuven and Shimon were married, and now two of these ladies are falling liyibum. So each one of them, it says in the Mishnah over there, Hanesuain es ha'achiyos, harei elu choltzos v'lo misyabas. So Reuven and Shimon die, harei elu, Levi and Yehuda, choltzos v'lo misyabas. Right? We don't allow, in this case, Yitzchak to do yibum. They both got to do chalitza. Question number one is why? Why don't we say that just like over here, once the first one does chalitza, the other one can do yibum? And two, over there, Rashi explains, if you continue in the Mishnah, it says that if, let's say, they both did yibum, the halach is they got to get divorced. Whereas by our case, we said that if it's kiblu, let's say they both went ahead and did yibum, the halacha is it would work. Why? Because once each one of them did it, it took care of the zika. Why don't you say the same thing over there? The Gemara says, the comparison is not a good. I don't know what I just did. There we go. It's going to go away again. Hold on. Technically retarded. Chaf Dalet Amud Aleph. Okay, let's bring back the picture if we need it. We probably won't, but okay. So Hachi Hashta, how can you make a comparison between the two cases? Hassam, by the case of Reuven and Shimon dying, Levi and Yehuda, they have a yibum responsibility with sisters. Ilamanda Amar Yesh Zika, meaning, I'm going to say it outside. the major difference is over there, it's a case where both ladies are vadai Yevamos, right? Reuven and Shimon are brothers who died and left over two brothers, but Rachel and Leah in that case are both married to someone. And therefore there's both a problem of Zika. So no matter which way you go, if I'm Yabem one, I'm absolutely 100% marrying the sister of my Zika. So therefore, Ilaman da Amar Yesh Zika. The Ilaman da Amar Asa Levatel Mitzvahs Yavmin, Asa Levatel Mitzvahs Yavmin. Meaning, there's two reasons why I can't do Yibum with either one of those ladies. Problem number one is Achas Kukaso. Problem number two is, if let's say I do Yibum with one of them, and of course I'm Yotze the mitzvah of Yibum when I do it because she is my brother's wife, I've been Mevatel the mitzvah with the other lady. Why? Because now the first lady Rachel is my wife. So what's the second lady Leah? Achos Ishtay. So I'm Mevatel mitzvah Yibum. So for two reasons, there's a problem doing Yibum. So therefore, both questions are answered. Hacha kol chad v'chad emer didei kamisram yolei. Here it's a suffix, meaning either it's Rachel the Yevama or it's Leah the Yevama, right? If it's Rachel, then the Chalitza with Leah took care of it, in which case now Yitzchak can be with her. And if it's Rachel, then the Yibum's mutter. No problem. There's absolutely no Isser here. Whereas in the case of the Mishnah later on, they're both absolutely Yevamas. So for both reasons, even after you did the Yibum, you'll have a problem of being Be'isser. So says the Gemara, there's no comparison. And La'ilam, that's the Chiddush of our Mishnah. Just one more case before we get to the end of the Gemara here. It said in the Mishnah, Kadmu v'Kansu, that in this last case, where let's say Shimon and Levi did Chalitza, right? So now Mitzad the Yevama L'Shuk problem, it's completely gone. It really just reverts to a regular case of Yaakov and Yitzchak, where as long as Yaakov does the Chalitza first, now Yitzchak can do the Yibum to Rachel. Very, very simple. Says the Gemara, Tani Shiloi, Ve'afilu Shneim Kehanim. Even if both of them are Kehanim. Now, what's the problem? We know that Shimon and Levi just did Chalitza with Rachel and Leah. That means one of them is Vadaya Chalutza. And what we're saying over here is that not only can Yitzchak do Yibum, why it's a Safek Chalutza, more than that, we said that let's say Yaakov and Yitzchak both did Yibum, they don't have to divorce them. Why not? If they're both doing Yibum, then one of them is for sure married to a Chalutza. Says the Gemara, Vafilu Shneim Kehanim. How? My timer, because Chalutza Derabanan he. And since it's Derabanan, the Safek Chalutza Legazer Behu Rabbanan. So it's interesting. All of a sudden now we're saying it's a Derabanan, a Safek Chalutza is okay. Meaning Safek, when you're talking about a Achos Kukaso, Achos Chalutzaso, for some reason over there, we didn't want to say that. Here all of a sudden the Gemara has a problem, but has no problem saying that they didn't make the Gzera. But I think over here it's a little bit better, because here there's multiple Sfekos. One, we don't know which one of these ladies is the actual Chalutza. And either Yaakov or Yitzchak could say, it's my brother who's married to the Chalutza, not me, right? Meaning, I think, I'm not sure if that's 100%, but it sounds to me like there would be a little bit more of a doubt here that I have someone I could say, no, Leah's the Chalutza, not my wife, and therefore, again, I'm not 100% sure about that. It could be it's still just one suffix, but it feels like there's more suffix there. Either way, says the Gemara, Lagazim Rabbanan. Ask the Gemara 1 second. The Chalutza de Rabbanan, is that really true? V'hatanya, I have a brisa. Grusha, the pasuk says in the Torah, Eli ela Grusha Chalutza minayin. Talmud Loimar ve'isha. Rashi says over here, the pasuk says me'isha lo yikhu. So it says me'isha we darshan. I think we darshan the yud. We darshan me'isha to teach me that you can't be with a Chalutza also. So Gemara says no. Midirabanan hu v'kros v'achta ba'almahu. That's just an asmachta, really. It is only a derabanan.
Wow.
Yeah. Okay. Very good. We'll pick up from here tomorrow. Mitzvah Shem. This.
Thank you.
Is a very long Mishnah. I hope we'll be able to finish it tomorrow.
Amen.
Okay.
Thank you.
My pleasure.
Bye-bye.
I'll post that.
Thank you, Rav Kevin.
My pleasure. All the best, guys.